Warning! This show isn't for the thin-skinned, the spoon-fed, or the folks who think a politician's press release counts as gospel. Tonight's episode dives into political hypocrisy, extremist ideology, and the uncomfortable truth about who our leaders choose to elevate, even when the receipts are sitting right there in the open. If you're allergic to facts, offended by honesty, or still trusting every polished statement that rolls out of a governor's office, this might not be the episode for you. But if you came here for clarity, accountability, and a political detox from the noise machine, then buckle in. Because Data and Dissonance isn't here to flatter egos or protect reputations. We're here to speak truth, stir thought, and shine a floodlight on the things respectable media avoids like the plague.
Imagine waking up and discovering your governor, the person steering the future of your state, is out there on social media praising a guy whose past writings include actual eugenics proposals, race purity arguments, and contributions to white supremacist publications. Not from a burner account, not by accident, not taken out of context, but full on. Hey everyone, follow this guy, he's an intellectual. That's what Colorado families walked into this week when Jared Polis decided that Richard Hanania, known in extremist circles by his former pseudonym Richard Hoste, deserved a bigger spotlight. And as the national press pretends to be shocked, as if his past wasn't documented for years, Coloradans are left wondering how the same political class that screams about extremism at every election suddenly can't recognize it when it's sitting right under their own blue-branded tent. Tonight, we're unpacking why this story matters, why the reaction is so bizarrely selective, and what it says about a political culture that's become way too comfortable playing blind whenever the extremism isn't coming from the right. Welcome back to Data and Dissonance, the only show where we read the fine print so you don't have to ask your governor why he's retweeting dudes with a history of eugenics blogs. We've got the whole crew here tonight. And trust me, they're loaded like it's deer season in Shreveport. Over here is Brian, who walked into the studio slamming a Red Bull like he was prepping to deliver a State of the Union about bad Democratic decisions. If outrage were cardio, the man would be shredded. Next up, we've got Rachel, who has already color-coded the entire scandal on her tablet and is prepared to fact-check Polis faster than he can say intellectual curiosity. Then there's Daniel, our human conspiracy corkboard, who walked in whispering, "I've been waiting years for this storyline." And finally, Skylar, the progressive voice who somehow still looks hopeful even as she watches another Democrat step on their own messaging rake. The gang is in the building. Let's get to work. Look, the thing that makes this scandal different isn't that a politician boosted someone controversial. Politicians boosting stupid people is practically a national pastime. No, this one is different because Polis boosted a guy whose past writings weren't just spicy takes or old hot-headed tweets. These were documented essays advocating forced sterilization for people he called low IQ, arguing against interracial relationships, pushing racial purity theories, and publishing in white supremacist outlets like the Occidental Observer. You don't stumble into that world. That's a worldview. Yet here we have a governor, one who markets himself as the friendly, inclusive, modern Democrat, saying people like this are intellectuals doing actual thinking. So let's bring in the panel, because this deserves a full unpacking.
Artie, this is what drives me insane about Democrats lecturing everyone about extremism like they've cornered the market on moral clarity. These are the same people who will call your grandma a fascist because she voted for Trump. But then suddenly they want to vibe with a guy whose old blog posts look like rejected drafts from a 1930s race science textbook. Polis had one job. Don't promote the guy who used to argue for eugenics. That's not a hard lift. That's not moral calculus. That's not even politics. That's basic adulting. And the excuse-making from his supporters is even worse. They're out here pretending like Hanania just had edgy opinions. No, man, edgy is saying pineapple belongs on pizza. Writing about forced sterilization is not edgy. That's the kind of thinking people fought actual world wars to stop. Yet Polis is out here thumbs-upping him like he's a guest lecturer from the TED Talk of Doom. It's the hypocrisy that gets me, the absolute refusal to hold their own to the standards they weaponize against everyone else.
Brian, my man, that was so explosive, I'm pretty sure the fire marshal is already on his way to shut this show down. You just dropped enough heat on Polis that the poor guy probably feels it all the way from the governor's mansion Wi-Fi router. But let's swing the camera over to someone whose blood pressure doesn't instantly spike at the sight of Democratic hypocrisy. Rachel, you've been watching this unfold like an exhausted parent who told the kids not to play with matches. But here we are, staring at a living room that smells like burnt popcorn and political incompetence. So help us out. Walk the audience through how a data-driven, tech-friendly governor managed to miss the giant neon sign that said, "Hey, this guy used to write eugenics essays, maybe don't hit the like button." Because clearly somebody in the governor's office was too busy updating their avocado toast budget spreadsheet to read the archives.
Artie, this is a textbook example of what happens when politicians endorse personalities before vetting their intellectual history. And in today's climate, that's political malpractice. The thing people forget is that Hanania wasn't hiding this past. Investigative journalists dug up his pseudonym years ago, and the archived writings are widely available. It's not a mystery. This wasn't buried in some deep web forum. So when Polis decided to frame him as an intellectual, that's a signal, intentional or not, that the governor either didn't care to look, didn't think it mattered, or assumed nobody would notice. All three options are concerning. And what's striking is how slowly the Democratic establishment is responding. Had a conservative elevated someone with this background, the media cycle would have already declared a national crisis. The selective outrage reveals the fracture. Authenticity matters more to voters than curated ideological loyalty. And Democrats keep learning that the hard way. This isn't just a scandal, it's a messaging disaster.
See, this is why we keep Rachel on the panel. Clarity, sanity, and the ability to explain political embarrassment without breaking into hysterical laughter like the rest of us. But now, let's move from the calm waters of analysis straight into the Category 5 hurricane of conspiracy, context, and uncomfortable truth. Daniel has been sitting here leaning forward like a guy who knows the plot twist before the audience does, and I'm a little scared because when Daniel gets that look, it usually means the story goes way deeper than anyone in the mainstream press wants to admit. So, Daniel, go ahead. Unpack this. Because if anyone can connect the dots between Colorado politicians, intellectual elitism, and the weird academic underbelly that keeps resurrecting eugenics like it's a forgotten Marvel villain, it's you. Take us into the labyrinth, brother. The one Polis hoped nobody would notice behind the curtain of progressive branding and rainbow flag press releases.
Artie, what fascinates me here isn't just the scandal, it's the pattern. Every few years, someone tied to the political or academic class gets caught platforming a figure whose ideological roots trace back to the same fringe pseudoscience networks, the same elitist genetic quality conversations, the same circles that treat eugenics like a quirky intellectual experiment instead of a moral catastrophe. And the establishment always reacts the same way: feigned shock, awkward silence, and then an attempt to minimize the connection. But you don't accidentally promote a guy like Hanania. These circles overlap more than people realize, especially in the tech policy world, where Hanania built his modern following. There's this undercurrent of elitism masquerading as brutal honesty, and politicians like Polis flirt with it because it gives them intellectual credibility with a certain crowd. But when the receipts come out, and they always do, suddenly everyone forgets how to read the archives. This isn't just a gaffe. This is an ideological dog whistle that Polis didn't think anyone outside his bubble would hear.
Daniel, that was... wow. I feel like I need a flowchart, a support group, and maybe a therapy goat to process all of that. You just broke down more political blind spots in 5 minutes than CNN has managed in 5 years. But now, we're turning to Skylar, our progressive compass, our moral GPS, and occasionally the only adult in the room when the rest of us are too busy roasting the people running the country. Skylar, you've watched your own sidestep on more rakes this year than a Looney Tunes character in a yard full of garden tools. So I'm curious, how does this land on the left? Because if a Republican had boosted someone with this kind of extremist history, the media would be hosting a week-long telethon about the death of democracy. Yet here we have a Democrat giving the intellectual equivalent of a high five to a former race purist, and the silence from your side could drown out a vacuum. Walk us through this. The frustration, the hypocrisy, and whatever faint hope you still have that your party will stop setting itself on fire while demanding applause from the crowd.
Artie, this story is infuriating because it undercuts everything progressives fight for: equality, accountability, and actually listening to marginalized communities. For a Democratic governor to elevate someone with this kind of past is a betrayal of the trust voters put in leaders who claim to care about justice. And the silence from national Democrats isn't helping. It feeds the perception that the party protects its own even when the harm is real. What I want to hear is a clear admission: this was a mistake, and here's why it matters. But instead we get deflection, nuance, and academic excuses. The left cannot build a moral platform while simultaneously validating people who once argued for racial purity. This is not someone who simply evolved. These were deliberate writings rooted in systems that have caused generational trauma. Polis needs to confront why he made this choice. And the party needs to stop pretending one of its own didn't just hand conservatives a massive credibility win.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we bring all four of these degenerates onto the show. Because they see the angles politicians pray you'll ignore. Polis didn't just accidentally promote a controversial thinker. He opened the political junk drawer, found a live grenade labeled "Do Not Touch, Extremist History" inside, and thought, perfect for sharing with constituents. Leaders don't get to play professor 1 minute and moral guardian the next. Not when the receipts read like rejected chapters from a dystopian novel. This story isn't just a PR blunder. It's a window into how unserious, uncurious, and flat-out reckless our political class has become. And if this is how they choose intellectual role models, God help us when they start choosing policy advisors. Tonight's show is brought to you by the Data and Dissonance Patriot merch line, featuring the gear that Washington wishes you wouldn't wear. We've got the I Identify as American hoodies, perfect for winter mornings, cold studios, and making your progressive neighbor wonder if you're about to quote the Constitution. The Zero Fucks Given hats are back in stock too. Structured, sharp, and guaranteed to get at least one side-eye at Whole Foods. And don't forget the 1776 Freedom Series shirts, bold enough to remind the world that patriotism never goes out of style. Represent the movement, represent the mindset, represent the truth. Grab yours at dataanddissonance.printify.me. When you strip away all the spin, the talking points, and the predictable partisan gymnastics, this story comes down to one simple reality. Leaders are responsible for the voices they amplify. Jared Polis didn't just share a spicy opinion. He elevated a man whose ideological track record is a map of ideas we should never revisit as a society. And when politicians fail that basic responsibility, they erode the trust of people who rely on them to make principled decisions. This isn't about left or right. It's about the moral clarity we expect from anyone who holds the public's confidence. What worries me most is how numb people have become to scandals like this. We're living in a time where accountability seems optional and where leaders assume the public won't dig deeper than whatever excuse they serve up at a press conference. But that's exactly why shows like this exist. We refuse to let the powerful hide behind vague language and curated narratives. We refuse to pretend that praising someone with a history rooted in racist ideology is just an intellectual slip. Leaders owe their constituents better than careless endorsements and half-hearted explanations. So, as we head into 2026 and the battles ahead, remember this: the fight for truth doesn't happen in silence. It happens when everyday Americans demand transparency, demand honesty, and demand that the people steering our states and our country live up to the standards they expect from everyone else. And as always, remember to speak truth. Stir thought. Tonight's episode is sponsored by the Caleb Rourke Thriller series, The Covenant Protocol, The Prophet Directive, and the soon-to-drop Black Echo Rising. If you thought tonight's political story was wild, Wait until you dive into a world of espionage, covert warfare, and conspiracies that cut deeper than Washington wants to admit. Grab the series now on Amazon and join the movement of readers who say, "This feels like tomorrow's headlines written today."